August 1945, on a quiet airfield outside Yokosuka. American naval intelligence officers walk past rows of unfinished aircraft frames. Most are conventional fighters, stripped and weathered. At the far edge of the field, partially concealed beneath camouflage netting, something different rests on wooden supports. Its fuselage is short and blunt. Wings are small, sharply swept. There is no room for landing gear in the usual sense. At the tail, scorched metal surrounds a rocket nozzle. Inside nearby hangars, the smell of fuel still lingers. Blueprints lie scattered across work tables. Some are stamped with dates from early 1945. Others bear handwritten corrections, rushed and uneven. None of the aircraft appear ready for flight. The war has ended. But whatever this program was, it had reached its final stage only weeks earlier. American officers take notes. Photographs are taken. Measurements are recorded. The question is not whether these machines will ever fly. It is why they were built at all. By the summer of 1944, Japan's strategic situation had deteriorated beyond recovery. American forces had captured the Marianas from newly constructed airfields on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. B-29 superfortresses could now reach the Japanese home islands. The bombing campaign began cautiously, but by early 1945, it intensified into sustained, systematic destruction of Japan's industrial centers. Japan's conventional air defenses were collapsing. Pilot losses were irreplaceable. Fuel shortages grounded much of the remaining air force. New interceptor designs entered service too late and in insufficient numbers. Against high-altitude B-29 formations, flying faster and higher than most Japanese fighters, interception rates remained low. By late 1944, Japanese military planners faced a choice between gradual defeat and extreme measures. It was within this context that the concept of rocket-powered interceptors flown on one-way missions gained official approval. These aircraft were not designed to return. They were intended to climb rapidly into bomber formations and destroy a target through direct collision. The most advanced of these designs was the Mitsubishi J8M Shusui. Derived from German technology transferred in 1944, it was powered by a liquid-fuel rocket engine capable of extraordinary climb rates. The aircraft could reach bomber altitude in minutes, far faster than piston-engine fighters. Its fuel supply, however, allowed for only a few minutes of powered flight. The concept was simple and unforgiving. The pilot would launch, climb vertically or near vertically, make a single attack pass, and collide with a B-29. There would be no return flight, no landing, no survival. By early 1945, Japan expanded this concept beyond the J8M. More radical designs followed. One of these was the Mizuno Shinru, a heavier rocket interceptor conceived specifically for ramming attacks. Unlike the Shusui, which was adapted from a German design, the Shinru was an indigenous Japanese project developed under extreme time pressure. The scale of these programs was significant, given Japan's collapsing industrial base. The J8M program alone involved Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, the Imperial Japanese Navy, and multiple subcontractors spread across Honshu and Kyushu. Production facilities were dispersed and partially moved underground to avoid air attack. By mid-1945, dozens of airframes were under construction, with components stored across several locations. The Shinru program, although less advanced, represented an even more desperate ambition. The aircraft was designed with heavy armor around the cockpit and reinforced structure at the nose to maximize damage during impact. Estimates suggest that several dozen airframes were planned, though only prototypes and mock-ups were completed. Training for rocket suicide pilots began in secrecy. Candidates were drawn from the remaining pool of young naval aviators, many with minimal flight hours. Instruction focused on basic handling, climb profiles, and attack geometry. There was no training for landing. Manuals emphasized commitment and precision. Fuel calculations were exact to the minute. The technical challenges were severe. Rocket engines required highly volatile fuels that were difficult to manufacture and dangerous to handle. Accidents were frequent. During test flights of the J8M, engine failures led to crashes, including fatal incidents. Each loss further reduced the already limited pool of trained pilots. Logistically, the programs were nearly impossible to sustain. Fuel shortages worsened throughout 1945. Transportation networks were disrupted by bombing. Airfields were cratered repeatedly. Even if the aircraft had reached operational readiness, coordinating their use against mass bomber formations would have required radar coverage and command systems that no longer functioned reliably. By the time American B-29s began low-altitude incendiary raids over Tokyo and other cities in March 1945, none of the rocket interceptors were operational. Production delays, engine problems, and fuel scarcity prevented deployment. Some aircraft achieved brief powered flights during testing, but none reached combat status. When Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, the rocket suicide fighter programs existed only on paper. In workshops and in partially assembled airframes, not a single successful interception had occurred. Allied discovery began immediately. American technical intelligence teams, including personnel from the Naval Technical Mission to Japan, were dispatched to inspect captured facilities. At Yokosuka, Nagoya, and other locations, investigators documented rocket aircraft components, engines, and design drawings. Reports noted the extreme simplicity and desperation of the designs. Investigators were struck by how little margin for error existed. Fuel capacity was measured in minutes. Structural tolerances were minimal. Pilot survival was not considered beyond launch. British observers shared similar conclusions. Soviet representatives granted limited access, showed interest in rocket propulsion data, but dismissed the operational value of the aircraft. Across Allied reports, the consensus was consistent. These were weapons born of strategic collapse, not technological superiority. Post-war testing was limited. A small number of engines and airframes were shipped to the United States for analysis. Engineers examined fuel systems, combustion chambers, and control mechanisms. While the basic rocket principles were sound, the overall design offered no advantages over emerging jet technology. By late 1946, most captured rocket fighters were scrapped. Aluminum and steel were reclaimed. Underground workshops were dismantled or sealed. There was no effort to preserve these aircraft for display. They were not seen as milestones, but as artifacts of a failed strategy. Japan's post-war government, under Allied occupation, had no incentive to memorialize suicide weapons. Public discussion of the programs faded quickly. Surviving documents were archived or lost. Former engineers rarely spoke about the projects in detail. In historical assessment, Japan's rocket suicide fighters occupy a narrow and somber place. They demonstrate the extent to which industrial resources were diverted towards symbolic resistance rather than effective defense. They reflect a command structure willing to sacrifice pilots for marginal tactical gain. Strategically, the programs had no measurable impact on the air war. They did not alter bombing patterns. They did not delay invasion plans. They consumed time, materials, and personnel that Japan could no longer afford to lose. In the broader context of military history, these aircraft foreshadow neither modern rocketry nor later air defense systems. Unlike ballistic missiles or space launch vehicles, they offered no scalable future. Their purpose was singular and terminal. Today, only fragments remain. A few components sit in museum storage. Photographs and technical drawings survive in archives. The airfields where they were discovered have been repurposed or erased. At Yokosuka, the concrete where those unfinished airframes once stood has long been resurfaced. Grass grows where rocket fuel was once stored. The silence that greeted Allied investigators in August 1945 has returned uninterrupted. The machines were never used as intended. The pilots were never launched. The final act of desperation ended before it began. What remains is not a story of technological innovation, but of exhaustion. Of a nation pushed beyond the limits of sustainable war, of weapons designed not to win, but simply to exist at the very end.